Hey everyone, Nike here. Welcome to episode 3 of my video series called A World Without, where I discuss the possible impact of removing, or at least heavily nerfing, an entire class and what it would do to the PvE raid meta. The first episode in the series was Mesmer. The second we covered the Elementalist, and today we'll be discussing the Warrior. Let's start by covering what the Warrior does in the current meta. First, Warrior brings with it some rather amazing group DPS buffs. Regardless of which Warrior build you're using, you can bring banners and empower allies, which together can buff your team DPS output by nearly 25%. From there, the Warrior branches off in two directions. One direction is the Kandi Berserker, which utilizes Scorched Earth spam to achieve extremely high DPS at range with an extremely simple DPS rotation. The other is to play as a more traditional direct damage build with Phalanx Strength to serve as the team's might generator, which can easily maintain 25 stacks of might on himself and 5 other allies in normal raid scenarios. With that covered, what would be the immediate result of Warriors being deleted or nerfed to oblivion in the meta? Without Warrior buffs like banners or empowered allies, the Ranger buffs become much more desirable. Spotter, Frost Spirit, Glyphs, and Grace of the Land are a worthy stand-in for Warrior's cache of DPS boosts. Currently, most teams bring a Druid to get access to these buffs, since they need a healer anyway, and this serves a bit of role compression. Without Warrior buffs, it is likely that both 5-man subgroups would desire a Druid to ensure they get the full buff potential. Additionally, having 2 Druids in a 10-man comp would mean that even with full Berserker gear and Scholar runes, they would have enough heals for the entire party, so each Druid could focus more on personal and team DPS and less on healing. Ranger Druid would be the clear gainer in this scenario. With the might stacking power of Phalanx Strength out of the meta, Revenant would become the raid's primary might generator. Currently, most Revenants run Facet of Nature and Facet of Darkness, as Warrior has might covered. Without Warrior, running Facet of Strength becomes necessary. Revenant can remove Facet of Darkness and give Fury generation over to the Druid, who is easily able to maintain permanent Fury for his team with a Pet Tiger and Warhorn 5. Any shortcoming in the Rev's might generation ability would be covered by the Signet of Inspiration from the Chronomancer, who would be giving back significant might to the rest of the team while creating some of their own via Golden Fraud Dumplings. So in this case, even with Revenant personal DPS perhaps being reduced, Revenants would still be incredibly desirable to their party as the team's primary might generator. This means that they'd be more like Warriors are in the current meta, rather than a privileged position of having high DPS and good buffs as they are now. Lastly, the pure DPS role of Kandi Berserker, one that I believe is actually likely to be nerfed, could be replicated by the Elementalist. For many fights, Elementalist could equal or exceed the DPS of Kandi Berserker. For current and future raid bosses where Kandi damage is required, the Engineer, Venomshare Thief, or Necro could see a big gain in popularity depending on what the other mechanics of the fight were and what would be necessary to deal with them. It would be highly likely that the big winner from the death of the Kandi Berserker would be the Engineer, since that was the Kandi class de jure prior to most of the community embracing the Kandi Warrior in their raid groups. However, the Kandi Necromancer is quite powerful. Currently, it is being a bit suppressed in the meta by the ease of use and high power of the Kandi Berserker. However, in a situation where the Kandi Berserker no longer exists, the full power of the Kandi Necro, especially in fights where there are a lot of ads to generate Jagged Horrors, could come into play, and you could see a definite increase in the use of the Kandi Necromancer in many comps in the current and future raids. So in conclusion, without the Warrior, we would see the desirability of DPS Druids increase tremendously, to the point where 2 per raid would be considered optimal. The Druid would also likely take on the role of primary team Fury stacker, with the Revenant relinquishing that role, and the Revenant adopting the Warrior's previous job of might generation. Lastly, when pure DPS is needed, the Kandi Berserker would give way to Tempests, and Engineers would take their spot in dedicated condition damage roles. However, for certain bosses with optimal mechanics to give it a chance, the Condi Necromancer could see a vast increase in its usage. Alright guys, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them below. Also let me know which profession you'd like to see next in this series, and I'll do my best to get to it. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I will see you next time.